Hello, America and the world. This is Radio Free Market, and I'm your guest host, Zoe Russell, standing in for Radio Free Market founder, Michael McKay. We are behind the lines of socialism, and Radio Free Market is the voice of free people and free markets. Our topic today is the real Middle East crisis. Who is the threat and who should be trusted? I'm thrilled to welcome our guest today, Eric Margolis, internationally syndicated columnist and author of American Raj, Liberation or Domination, Resolving the Conflict Between the West and the Muslim World. Margolis is the, quote, man who got it right about the inevitable complications that the U.S. has gotten itself into with Iraq and Afghanistan, where we're still trying to unstick ourselves from his term, Bush's tar baby. He's led an amazing life with stories ranging from nearly being kidnapped in Yemen, surviving a hijacking of a Lufthansa liner, and being under fire numerous times on the line of control in Kashmir. Needless to say, Margolis is a true investigative journalist rather than an armchair war reporter. So my first question to you, Mr. Margolis, is, will you give us a quick overview of the current state of the war in Afghanistan? Do you see us pulling out and leaving security up to the Afghans anytime soon?
No, the Americans and Canadians are not being told the truth by Afghanistan. They're being given a very distorted view because the U.S. military has a vice-like grip on all information coming out of Afghanistan. It learned its lesson during the Vietnam War. Journalists must not be allowed to report what's going on but what we tell them. And the American media, most of it, has shamefully acquiesced to military control and becoming mouthpieces for the military. So no, we're not getting an accurate view. What is happening is that the Taliban and its allied forces are gaining more ground in Afghanistan. They now control about half the country. The government is teetering and tottering. Corruption and drug dealing are endemic. And far from winning the hearts and the minds of the Afghans, the U.S. and foreign military forces, who are now even more than the number of Soviet troops that were there in the 1980s, are generating more and more hostility among Afghans, and the numbers of fighters in the Taliban ranks are rising.
So why did we end up going after the Taliban? Whatever happened to going after al-Qaeda?
Well, that's an excellent question. There was a mistaken belief in Washington that Taliban was sheltering or allied to al-Qaeda. This was caused because al-Qaeda was fighting alongside Taliban against the Afghan communists, who were in turn supported by Russia and Iran. But Taliban had nothing to do with 9/11, knew nothing about it, was unhappy about Osama bin Laden's activities, and I have to say parenthetically, if Osama bin Laden was really behind the 9/11, because we don't have conclusive proof yet. But after 9/11, the Bush administration needed a target. It was caught sleeping on guard duty. It was a humiliating attack on the U.S. They needed a target for revenge. The Al-Qaeda, which I was there when it was being formed, was actually a very tiny organization with never more than 300 members. It was too small and shadowy to make a decent target, so Taliban was picked. And the Taliban were told to hand over the Al-Qaeda. They said, no, there are honored guests. It's an Afghan tradition. And Taliban said, send us a proper extradition request and we will process it. The U.S. never did that. It simply invaded, made Taliban the enemy. And in fact, Taliban is not a terrorist organization. There's a religious anti-communist organization that is primarily drawn from the Pashtun tribe and represents the Pashtun people, who are the ethnic majority of Afghanistan. So we have created an enemy for ourselves where we didn't need one, and today we are fighting the Pashtun tribes, which is what every other past empire has done and come out the worse for it. But we don't seem to understand, and we so demonize Taliban in our media and by politicians that we no longer are able to deal with them, and we painted ourselves into a corner.
Well, let me go to a commercial break there, and we'll come back and figure out who we are backing in Afghanistan. Welcome back to Radio Free Market. We have with us Eric Margolis. Eric is a syndicated columnist who is a wonderful war reporter and helps us see into the truth of the Middle East. So, Eric, we were just talking about the Taliban, who we are fighting. Who is the group that we're backing in Afghanistan?
Well, when we went into Afghanistan, the Bush administration made exactly the same mistake that the Soviets made. And in fact, the two occupations uncannily resemble one another. They're almost mirror images. When the Soviets came in, their local allies were the Afghan Communist Party and two major ethnic minorities, the Tajiks and the Uzbeks, who are both in the northern half of Afghanistan, who are the traditional blood enemies of the majority in Afghanistan, who are Pashtun, or as they used to be called, Pathans. The British used to call them that. The British fought 4 wars against the Pashtun and lost all 4 of them. So what the U.S. did was it allied itself with the Communist Party of Afghanistan, led by an Uzbek warlord and war criminal named Rashid Dostam, and it allied itself with the Tajik Northern Alliance, which was really part of the old Afghan communist, and the major drug dealers in Afghanistan. Taliban had completely crushed the Afghan drug trade. It had eliminated it. The only part that remained was being run by the Northern Alliance, the Tajik Northern Alliance. Well, Washington came in, and the troops that entered Kabul to throw out the Taliban were Tajik and Uzbek troops paid by the CIA, led by a Russian general. The Russians have been arming this Northern Alliance, and it's my understanding that they even sent troops from former Soviet Central Asia disguised as Afghans to join the battle against Taliban. Fast forward to today, what we have is of Afghanistan's 32 million people, we have half of them who are Pashtuns who are fighting them. And we are trying to, the Karzai government, though Karzai is a Pashtun, he has no credibility among the Pashtun tribes, Washington has imposed a Tajik and Uzbek government, this Northern Alliance, in Afghanistan. That's the real government. The old Afghan communists are running the intelligence service. And the result of this, as happened with the Soviets, is that the Pashtun will never accept the government that's run by the Tajiks and the Uzbeks. The Afghan army that the U.S. is trying to found and the Afghan police are primarily composed of Uzbeks and Tajiks, and that's why Afghanistan cannot develop a loyal or credible army.
So we're slowly following the Taliban and following them down south into Pakistan, as you've predicted for years. Why is this?
Because it's the old thing we heard during the days when I was in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War. We got the base camps in Cambodia. If we can only go into Cambodia and into Laos, we can drain the swamp and we can really get at them. Failure to win in Afghanistan, the soldiers now want to go into Pakistan. A very dangerous move, because Pakistan is a country of 175 million people with a 600,000 man armed forces. But the U.S. is getting drawn into fighting inside Pakistan. We now have special forces operating there. We're staging cross-border raids. We have these constant predator aerial assassination things. We've rented large parts of the Pakistani army. CIA teams are operating there. There's a 3,000-man mercenary force run by CIA, and there's an army, we don't know how many, of American financed mercenaries who are operating not only in Afghanistan but across the border into Pakistan's tribal territories. And by the way, this area that I'm talking about, the Pakistani tribal territories, are almost entirely ethnic Pashtun. And the Pashtun of Pakistan do not recognize the border drawn by the British, separating them from their Pashtun brothers and cousins inside of Afghanistan.
I see. So the Pakistan government, why do they allow us to impose ourselves into their sovereign country?
because Pakistan was bankrupt, thanks to the last military dictator, General Musharraf, who we supported, stole what little money was left in Pakistan, a desperately poor country, and run by feudal landlords. The new government came in. We engineered Asif Zardari into power. And we have taken effective control of Pakistan's army and government. We bought them, literally. I call it a rent-a-country and a rent-an-army, and we have allocated up to $5 billion to buy or rent the Pakistanis temporary loyalty, cooperation. And we've taken control of the Pakistani High Command and the promotion schedules there. And we're feeding, funding, transporting, paying for an army of Pakistani mercenaries. So really Pakistan's gone back to like the old days of the British Raj when their soldiers were known as sepoys. And we're renting them. We're renting them, but we're not buying full cooperation or certainly loyalty.
I see. So in Iraq, we control the puppet government of Maliki. In Kabul, Afghanistan, we've set up the government of Karzai. And in Pakistan, we control Zardari. Obviously, the peoples who live in these countries aren't appreciative of this. If we're not actually fighting for legitimate democracy, what are we fighting for?
Well, we're fighting for our great power interests. However, they're determined by the ruling circles in Washington. No, it's an arrogant lie that we're fighting for democracy. I mean, if you just look this last week, Egypt, which has the largest country in the Arab world, it has 1/3 of all Arabs, members of the Arab world, live in Egypt. Egypt is a virtual American colony and has been for decades. And they held yet another absolutely rigged election, threw anybody who dared protest into jail or beaten and tortured, and that there was hardly a peep from the United States government. Yet if the U.S. really wanted to start bringing democracy to the Muslim world, it should start in Egypt, as I've been saying in my book, American Raj, and it could do something in Morocco, it could do something in Jordan, or in Tunisia, or in Algeria, etc., or in Arabia, in the Saudi Arabia or in the Gulf. Instead, the U.S. claimed it was bringing democracy to Afghanistan and Pakistan. Well, this is a canard floated by the neocons in the Bush administration to justify launching classic colonial wars against these countries to grab their resources.
So would you say that the military, industrial, financial complex, as you say, in the U.S., thrives off of this corruption in the Middle Eastern government?
It does. One of the most shameful things I feel that as an American is that we have been hugely instrumental in accelerating corruption in the countries that we dominate. I mean, all of these countries of the Muslim world were corrupt to begin with. Back to the days of Babylon, we didn't need to export it. But what we've done is we have encouraged corrupt oligarchies, dictatorships, monarchies, and we bought the allegiance of these countries. It's typical imperial behavior. But look how we totally bought and corrupted Pakistan, shamefully. And one of the reasons the Islamic militant groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, Taliban, one of their primary reasons for attacking the United States or being anti-American is that they say the Americans are they're corrupting our people. They've corrupted our politicians. They bought them lock, stock, and barrel, and they're stealing the money away from the people. And so we have encouraged this process of corrupt regimes looting their countries, and it will continue.
So do you see this military-industrial complex leading Obama into further conflict with Iran?
I do. Unfortunately, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on President Obama, who's unfortunately turned out to, it looks like a very weak-willed president who's buffeted by the political winds in Washington. He doesn't have much spine, and his weakened government, it's hard for them to say no. There is very strong pressure from the military-industrial complex, against which General Eisenhower warned us. I have a photograph of General Eisenhower behind my desk, and to remind us of what upright Americans used to be like. Yes, there are huge military contracts in our almost $1 trillion military budget. There's just enormous amounts of money involved in keeping these wars going. If they stopped, the defense, or I don't like to call them defense, military industries in the States would be in dire trouble. So, yes, there's that pressure. There are political groups in the United States with their own special interests that want the U.S. to go to war against Iran. And these war drums are beating loudly. There's tremendous pressure, and there is still resistance in the Pentagon, in the CIA, and even in some members of Congress who are scared to come out in public and oppose the rush to war against Iran. But there's opposition there, but it's under great pressure.
I see. So what are we doing now? What are the economic sanctions that we're imposing on Iran? We use that term as though it's a diplomatic form of pressuring Iran. What actually is that?
I think it's more accurate to call it economic warfare, at which we are very good. What we've done is we've surrounded Iran with all kinds of embargoes on machinery, equipment, components, technology, you name it, to try and cripple not only Iran's nuclear program, but also its industries and its military industries and its ability to produce even weapons for self-defense. We've moved against its financial institutions, the banks, trading companies, against Iranian exports. We're trying to shut Iranian oil exports out of the market. We were talk of embargoing gasoline imports into Iran.
Let me cut you off there so we can go to break, and we'll come back and see what effect these sanctions have on the people of Iran. And we're back with Eric Margolis. Eric, can you tell us more about how these economic sanctions affect the people of Iran? They just push the people of Iran to hate the U.S. because it actually has greater effect on them than any government employee.
It does. So far, people are not suffering too much in Iran, though they're very angry about the sanctions and this economic warfare the U.S. is waging against Iran. People still have enough food to eat. They have hospitals. They have gasoline, so they're not feeling the pressure too much. The government definitely is. Iran is now suffering what Iraq did before 2003, and that is that the U.S. embargo sanctions have prevented Iran from any modernization of its military forces. They're all ancient and decrepit from the 1970s. And what I find is shocking is that the U.S., under pressure from certain lobbies, has embargoed the sale of any modern aircraft or aircraft parts. And as a result, Iran has had a constant series of deadly air crashes as its ancient passenger aircraft crash and fall apart. This is inhumane, what we've been doing to this, and I'm surprised the UN hasn't gotten involved and demanded that the civilian aircraft embargo be lifted. But anyway, this has happened. Iran is feeling the pain. It's still tolerable, but it's hurting more and more.
I see. So today there's a reported 50 Al-Qaeda members left in the region that we're actually warring in. How many people have we sent after these very few Al-Qaeda members?
Well, that is the fixed 64,000 dinar question. Leon Panetta, the CIA chief, said he estimated there were no more than 50 Al-Qaeda people in Afghanistan, and I believe that even that number may be too large. In fact, so we have 120,000 American troops at a cost of $1 million per year per soldier, plus God knows how many bribes to the Afghan government. We have 120,000 troops chasing 50, 40, 30 Al-Qaeda people. It sounds absolutely preposterous. And I don't know why Americans in the media are not demanding an answer to this question. What it says to me very clearly is that Al-Qaeda is a phantom. And I've been saying it for years, and it's been vastly exaggerated. And the U.S. forces are there not chasing Al-Qaeda or Osama bin Laden, but they're there for great power reasons of geopolitical control of the Caspian Basin's oil and transit routes through strategic Afghanistan.
I see. Recently, WikiLeaks has not only revealed the corruption in Afghanistan, but that several Mideast leaders, the King Hamad of Bahrain and King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, for example, want harsher control over Iran's proliferation. I'm sure this is not news to you, but mainstream media spins this as proof that Iran is a destabilizer. Do you think Iran is the one destabilizing the region, or is it instead destabilizing the current authoritarian Mideastern governments?
Well, I think it's the latter for sure. It's like the hypocrisy of Hillary Clinton, who blasts Iran for, quote, meddling, unquote, in Iraq, after when there are still 50,000 U.S. troops keeping what is this, in essence, a puppet government in power. No, these Arab monarchs are American plantation overseers. They work for us. They, of course, are saying, worrying about Iran, but their fear about Iran is not nuclear weapons. There's no way Iran would ever use a nuclear weapon against Kuwait or Bahrain, which are within eyesight of Iran. They're worried by the call of the Iranian revolutionary ideal, which is to overthrow these kleptocracies sustained by the West, to spread the money around for social welfare programs and to uplift their countries, to help other Muslim countries. Look, Saudi Arabia's just put in an order for $60 billion worth of U.S. arms at a time when Pakistanis, their fellow Muslims in Pakistan, are starving, literally. I mean, it is iniquitous. But they fear the revolutionary call of Iran. They have for a long time, ever since the Iranian Revolution. That's why the U.S. and these Arab states colluded with Saddam Hussein's Iraq to invade Iran, to try and snuff out the revolution, which was a danger to America's oil empire, what I call the American Raj. So it's not the nuclear weapons.
I see. So
not that there are any, by the way.
Exactly, yes. And this has been proven by our intelligence agencies. I'm not sure who Hillary Clinton wants to believe, or what we're really trying to keep Iran from doing, except for running their country without our say-so. But Secretary, sorry, go ahead.
No, Hillary Clinton clearly has her eye on taking the leadership of the Democratic Party when Obama falls by the wayside, and she's now playing to key constituencies by calling for war against Iran.
Right. So she's accepting maybe Israel's intelligence over the U.S. intelligence agencies, or 16 intelligence agencies.
Israel's intelligence products have dominated U.S. strategic thinking ever since 2002 or 2001. We rely too much on Israeli intelligence, which serves the purposes of Israel, not the United States. But it has come to be the gospel word, and we're continuing to do that, and we don't have an effective enough independent capability. But even so, having said that...
Let me cut you off there. Sorry about that, Eric. Let me cut you off there, and we're going to go to break and come back and look further into Iran's history. Thank you.